This is the Voice of Vietnam.
This is the Voice of Vietnam, broadcasting from Hanoi, capital of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam.
Welcome to the Voice of Vietnam. We are Nhật Quỳnh and Nguyen. In today's program, After the News.
On today's current affairs, we take a closer look at how the G20 summit in Johannesburg is pushing forward key priorities for Africa and other developing nations.
In village life, we travel to U Minh Hạ region of Cà Mau province to explore the centuries-old craft of chalice beekeeping.
And in the culture edition, we highlight cultural clubs in Thái Nguyên province which are helping preserve and pass on ethnic traditions. But first, here's the news. In the headlines, Prime Minister Phạm Minh Chính pledges stronger Vietnamese investment in South Africa. All available forces are mobilized to rescue victims of devastating Central Region floods. And the U.S. confirms a draft peace plan aimed at ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now for the news in details. Prime Minister Phạm Minh Chính has pledged stronger Vietnamese investment in South Africa as he addressed the Vietnam-South Africa Business Forum in Johannesburg on Friday, with South African Vice President Paul Shipokosa Mashatile in attendance. Mr. Chính in South Africa for the G20 summit and bilateral activities call on the business communities of both countries to deepen investment and cooperation.
Chúng tôi thì sẽ đầu tư
We'll invest in sectors we have strength, such as agriculture and agricultural product manufacturing. Vietnamese enterprises will come to South Africa to produce and export rice directly from here, targeting Africa's market of more than 1 billion people. We'll also continue cooperation in mining, oil and gas, electronics, textiles and garments, leather and footwear.
The Vietnamese Prime Minister also urged South Africa to invest in new growth drivers, including innovation, the green economy, and the creative economy. He proposed elevating the Intergovernmental Committee co-chaired by the two countries' foreign ministers. On this occasion, Prime Minister Chính and Vice President Mashatile witnessed the signing of multiple cooperation agreements in strategic defense technologies, tourism, and air transport. Widespread torrential rainfall and high tides triggered historic flooding in Vietnam's Central Region over the past week, causing extensive loss of life and property in Gia Lai, Đắk Lắk, Lâm Đồng, and Khánh Hòa province. As of 6:30 a.m. Friday, floods had left 52 people dead or missing, more than 68,000 homes submerged, and multiple residential areas cut off by fast-moving waters. Agricultural production and infrastructure have sustained heavy damage. On Friday morning, Deputy Prime Minister Nguyễn Hòa Bình signed a directive allocating $26.5 million for emergency disaster relief operations. The armed forces have mobilized tens of thousands of the officers and soldiers, along with motorboats, rescue canoes, pumps, generators, tents, and life vests. The Ministry of National Defense has prepared helicopter landing sites for rescue missions. Major General Trần Thanh Hải, Deputy Commander of Military Region 5, said,
We have deployed helicopters to airlift relief supplies to severely flooded areas where residents remain stranded and urgently need food.
During an online meeting Thursday with the 4 affected provinces, Deputy Prime Minister Hồ Quốc Dũng said flooding has surpassed historical record. He directed all forces to focus on rescuing residents and ensuring that no one lacks food, clean water, or warmth. He urged them to act, quote-unquote, as fast as possible, as strongly as possible, and as resolutely as possible.
We have mobilized all available forces to deeply flooded areas to evacuate residents. For relocation, priority will be given to the safest, most accessible locations. Teams have been deployed to deliver food and supplies, and in isolated areas, dry rations and drinking water. Personnel have been assigned to cook meals for people in evacuation shelters.
Cần Thơ City is focusing on improving public awareness and supporting fishermen compliance during its peak campaign to combat illegal, unreported and unregulated IUU fishing. Cần Thơ Border Guard Unit and the Department of Agriculture and Environment have communicated fishing regulation to vessels owners and fishermen. Thousands of leaflets have been distributed. Nguyen Văn Thọ is a local fisherman.
This communication campaign benefits fishermen. We are committed to complying fully with the regulations.
Border Guard forces are also actively patrolling the seas, according to Colonel Phạm Lê Xuân Bình.
Ngoài cái việc tuyên truyền ở trên bờ, đơn vị cũng đã chỉ đạo các cái đơn vị.
We're working directly with fishermen, especially vessel owners and captains, to improve their understanding about IUU fishing regulations. We instruct border control stations not to allow any ineligible fishing vessel to sail. Vessel owners and captains are required to sign commitments not to engage in IUU fishing or violate foreign waters.
All of Cần Thö's 784 registered fishing vessels are in the National VN Fish Base database, and 100% of vessels 50 meters or longer have installed Vessel Monitoring System VMS devices as required. Since last year, no Cần Thơ fishing vessel has operated in foreign waters. Vietnam continues to lead the region in consumer optimism, driven by positive economic outlook and confidence in personal finances. The findings are part of the 6th edition of the ASEAN Consumer Sentiment Study released by Singapore-based United Overseas Bank UOB on Thursday. Vietnam recorded the highest score on the newly launched UOB ASEAN Consumer Sentiment Index at 67, well above the regional average of 54. The index is derived from 6 key indicators measuring consumers' perception of current and future economic condition and their personal finances. More than 8 in 10 Vietnamese respondents expressed optimism about the country's broader economic, with the sub-index increasing by 12 percentage points from 2024. This sentiment is supported by Vietnam's robust macroeconomic performance in the first half of 2025, including its GDP growth of 7.52% year-on-year, which is the highest first-half growth recorded since 2011. Vietnamese consumers show strong confidence in the country's political, economic, and social stability despite global uncertainties, including the U.S. tariff. Vietnam's national team has moved up 1 spot to 110th in FIFA's November World Rankings, according to the latest update from the Vietnam Football Federation, VFF. FIFA published the list earlier than usual to prepare for the draw of the 2026 World Cup playoff round. Vietnam's rise in the standings gives the team a boost as it works to sharpen its performance and reach some long-term goals. Japan continues to top the Asian rankings, followed by Iran and South Korea. Vietnam stands 20th in Asia and maintains its position as the second highest ranked team in Southeast Asia, behind Thailand.
You're listening to The Voice of Vietnam, and now some more news. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said on Thursday that the 28-point peace plan backed by U.S. President Donald Trump and currently being negotiated with Russia and Ukraine is the most viable path forward for Moscow and Kiev. Leavitt said the plan, developed over the past month by President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, is moving forward and remains subject to change. She added that Washington is engaged in positive discussions with both Ukraine and Russia to fully understand the commitments. While declining to comment on details of the proposal, Leavitt rejected suggestions that the initiative would disadvantage Ukraine. The office of the Ukrainian president said President Volodymyr Zelensky has received the plan and he will speak with President Trump in the coming days about the key points for achieving peace. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Thursday that reaching a political and diplomatic solution to the conflict in Ukraine remains a priority. He added that Russia is ready at any moment, but stressed that the core challenge is to address the root cause of the conflict. At least 5 people, including a child, were killed and around 100 injured when a magnitude 5.7 earthquake struck Bangladesh on Friday, the government said. Buildings were also damaged in many areas, including the densely populated capital. Tremors were felt in eastern states in neighboring India that border Bangladesh, but there were no immediate reports of major damage there, authorities said. The injured included university students, factory workers, and residents, according to Muhammad Yunus, the head of Bangladesh's interim government.
To end the news, hear the headlines once again. Prime Minister Phạm Minh Chính pledges stronger Vietnamese investment in South Africa. All available forces are mobilized to rescue victims of devastating Central Region floods. And the U.S. confirms a draft peace plan aimed at ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict. That's the news on VOV. You are listening to the Voice of Vietnam, and here comes Current Affairs segment. The G20 summit taking place on Saturday and Sunday in Johannesburg, South Africa, is focused on strengthening global effort to support developing nations, particularly African countries, in addressing issues related to climate, energy, and public finance.
Themed Unity, Equality, Sustainability. This year's G20 summit brings together senior leaders from most member countries and organizations, along with several invited nations. The United States, the G20's largest economy, said it would not attend this year. Held in Africa for the first time, this year's summit is important for the host South Africa and the rest of the continent. The summit's theme and agenda, which were proposed by South Africa, focus on fostering international solidarity, supporting developing countries in coping with climate change, accelerating energy transition, and easing national debt burdens. In a report released prior to the summit, the UN Conference on Trade and Development said the public debt of developing countries has grown twice as far as that of advanced economies since 2010, reaching $31 trillion. The average debt to GDP ratio for sub-Saharan African countries is 58.5%, lower than that of developed economies like the US, 125%, or Japan, 230%. But Africa's per capita debt payment exceeds investment in essential sectors. UN data show that between 2021-2023, Africa spent $70 per capita on debt interest payments, more than on education, $63, or health, $44. Debt reduction and restructuring for African countries were undoubtedly a major theme in Johannesburg. Elizabeth Sidiropoulos, Executive Director of the South African Institute of International Affairs, said that with South Africa hosting the summit and the African Union now a full G20 member, Africa is well positioned to drive discussions on reforming the global financial system and advancing its other priorities. Next year, South Africa will hand over the G20 presidency to the U.S. Busisifo Siobi, a public policy researcher at Good Governance Africa in Johannesburg, said Africa possesses essential mineral resources for the global energy transition, but gains little benefit from them. The G20 summit in South Africa presents an opportunity to change that.
The real question now really goes around how do we ensure that the people on the continent are benefiting from these minerals, and how are they serving the current energy crises that we have respectively within the continent. As you know, I think the statistics around 600 million Africans live without electricity. So how do we ensure that this transition is also able to speak to the development challenges of the continent?
On Thursday, South Africa and the European Union signed a memorandum of understanding to partner on creating sustainable minerals and metals value chains that are grounded in shared objective and mutual benefits, and to jointly develop projects to locate, extract, refine, and recycle minerals and metals. The G20 summit will also need to address In addition to African priorities, maintaining multilateralism in a time of geopolitical instability. The absence of the U.S. President Donald Trump, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and the leaders of several other countries, such as Argentina and Mexico, reduces the likelihood that the G20 will issue a meaningful joint statement on climate change, finance, global trade, or debt relief for developing countries. Analysts point out, however, that divisions within the G20 stemming from geopolitical competition and trade disputes emerged before the Johannesburg summit, so the G20 should establish a strategic roadmap before attempting to resolve short-term disagreements. Ms. Sidiropoulos said,
And so the bigger issue that the G20 does have to tackle as it looks forward to its next cycle is exactly how can it refocus to make sure that it plays a role as a useful platform to drive reform, to drive policy processes that help to deal with the big problems that the world is facing.
Analysts say that although the U.S. shift in policy will affect the G20's direction, other members still have the capacity to advance multilateralism and free trade. In a report released last Friday, the World Trade Organization said imports of the G20 economies quadrupled between mid-October 2024 and mid-October this year, as U.S. tariff prompted other countries to implement trade liberalizing measures. This shows that most countries want to lower trade costs despite rising protectionism. Surging demand for AI-related products has strengthened the G20 economies, which lead the world in technology.
And now it's time for our Village Life segment. The U Minh Ha area of Cà Mau province is preparing to enter spring. That's what forest workers call the honey harvesting season, when the rains cease, the cajeput trees burst into bloom, and migrating bee colonies return. What once depended entirely on nature has evolved into a recognized cultural heritage profession. Local forest workers have turned trellis beekeeping into a stable source of income.
The 9th and 10th lunar months, when heavy rains drive the bees away, is the toughest time in U Minh Ha's cajeput forests. In the 11th lunar month, when sunshine returns, so do the bees. From then until the 3rd or 4th lunar month is honey harvest season, what locals affectionately call U Minh Ha's spring. Seizing rare sunny intervals between long stretches of rain, Huỳnh Vũ Hoàng strips the bark of 1-meter cajeput trunks from his family's plot, dries them, polishes the surface, and drills 2 small openings. Years ago, forest workers had to haul trellises on their shoulders through dense reeds. Today, they glide along narrow canals called luong in small span-pan boats to transport the trellises deep into the forest. Each worker tends a family plot of cajeput. During the routes, they mark promising locations, clear the reeds, and set off trellises to attract wild bees. In the rainy months, bees still build hive but produce little honey, Hoàng says.
After putting up 20 to 30 trellises, we'll return a week later to check them. If bees have settled, we note the date. 2 weeks after they arrive, we can harvest. A 1-meter hive can yield 9 to 10 liters in a single cut. The second harvest may be even better. For that round, we wait longer, 8 to 20 days, and trim part of the young comb. If we don't, it gets too heavy, so we have to clean it up.
Trellises beekeeping in U Minh Ha is now recognized as a national intangible cultural heritage. In the past, bees nested high in tree tops. Over time, by observing bee behavior and forest conditions, local workers developed a unique skill, the art of breathing sunlight and wind deep within the forest, passed down through generations. Trellises placement changes with the seasons. In the cold, rainy months, bees need more warmth, so workers orient the trellis so that 2/3 face the sun. In the dry season, when sunlight is intense, the trellis is positioned to capture only 1/3 of direct light, as excessive heat discourages bees from nesting. Forest worker Phạm Duy Khánh explains.
Tập tính của con ong mà tùy theo cái cây kèo, người thợ mà đi rừng á là họ.
You have to understand the bee's habit to adjust the trellis. When workers find a good spot, they remember it. But sometimes, they still have to shift the trellis slightly. The most important factor is wind. If the reeds sway too much, they block the bees from blending. The second factor is sunlight. It determines whether the hive produces abundant honey.
On clear days before spring arrives, forest workers guide tourists into the forest to watch honey being harvested. Huge hives stretching a meter or more leave visitors amazed. In 2015, Cà Mau province promoted community-based tourism in U Minh Hạ, giving trellis beekeeping new momentum. When the cajeput flowers bloom, visitors follow forest workers to observe the hive and witness the harvesting process, a vivid glimpse into the community's bond with forest and nature. During the harvest, workers always leave part of the hive intact so the colony can regenerate. Tourism has boosted honey prices, giving families better, more stable incomes. Beekeeper Phạm Văn Ngọt says.
The trellises attract plenty of bees. If we set up 40 trellises, at least 20 will have colonies. Some seasons are better than others, but it still earns more than farming. It's a good livelihood. We love trellis beekeeping.
In U Minh Hạ, generations have protected the green forest, so the bees will return every year, carrying them the scent of fresh honey. Every trellis represents countless days under sun and rain, and the forest workers hope for a better life in the cajeput woods.
You're listening to the Voice of Vietnam, and it's now time for our Culture Edition. Ethnic cultures in the northern Midland province of Thái Nguyên have been preserved through generations. Amid the rapid changes of contemporary life, the sounds of folk songs, dances, and traditional musical instruments still echo, linking the past with the present. Local folk culture and art clubs have become a vital bridge, helping ethnic communities not only safeguard but also promote their cultural treasures.
In Dong Hỷ commune, members of the Tam Thái Sọng Kho Club gather at the local cultural house every week to practice Sọng Kho singing of the San Diu ethnic group. In their brightly colored traditional costumes, middle-aged women and men sit together in a circle, sing a call and response song. Club members Âu Thị Phạm and Đỗ Thị Tuyết said.
We have been preserving Sọng Kho singing for years. At this age, we can still participate in activities, gather and sing together. That brings me the greatest joy. The culture of the San Diu people is deeply rooted in my heart. Every time I sing Sọng Kho, I feel happy.
Since Sọng Kho singing in Dong Hỷ was recognized as a national intangible cultural heritage in 2015, club activities have become even more widespread. Emeritus artisan Diệp Minh Tài, the head of the Tam Thái Sọng Kho Club, has been translating ancient books, recording Sọng Kho songs and teaching them to the younger generation.
Initially, the Tam Thái Sọng Kho Club operated only within the village. Over time, other clubs came to learn from his experience, sparking a shared movement that connects one commune to another and even one province to another.
Tam Thái Sọng Kho Club member Lê Văn Tiến said.
We still wear traditional costumes and sing Sọng Kho when we work in the fields or welcome guests. Our club has helped to promote the cultural identity of the San Diu people.
In Vô Chanh commune, the San Chai people are working to preserve their Taksing dance, a form of performing art that has been recognized as a national intangible cultural heritage. Trần Thị Bắc, a member of the Vô Chanh commune Taksing club said.
Tôi thấy rất tự hào bởi vì mình là người con của cái dân tộc này.
I'm very proud to be a San Chai. I always keep in mind that I must preserve our Taksing dance so it won't fade away. This is an intangible culture, so we have to pass it on to one another.
The club has 20 members who regularly practice and perform a cultural exchange events. Their dedication to preserving their cultural identity and the support of local authorities have made Tak Sing dance a focus of the province's efforts to safeguard its folk culture. A similar effort to preserve traditional culture is being made by the Thai ethnic community at the Thai Hai Ecological Village, where Tan singing and the melodies of the tiếng instruments can be heard. In Thai Hai, Tan melodies continue to accompany festive occasions and New Year celebrations. The Thai Hai Ecological Village preserves the traditional steel houses and customs of the Thai people and organizes classes where young people can learn to play the tiếng instrument and sing Tan. Villager Lê Thị Hằng said.
Here, the traditional cultures of ethnic groups have been passed from generation to generation. I was taught by my grandparents and elders, and I have a responsibility to pass it on to my children and grandchildren.
Thái Nguyên province is working to preserve hundreds of intangible cultural heritages. Clubs of Song Kọ, Tak Sing and Tan singing have been established to preserve these heritages, engage the community in cultural activities, and meet the cultural needs of the local people.
And that's it for the show today. We'll see you tomorrow, this time, with more music and news story. For now, goodbye.